Hello, and welcome to the AI Insiders, your one-stop podcast for, well, AI insiders. That is, on this podcast, we try to take an inside-out look at AI from the perspectives of those who are on the front lines of building AI, testing and applying AI, and trying to make AI behave. By which I mean spending their time trying to make AI enable humans to be able to do more good for more of us. I'm Adam Russell. I'm the director of the AI division at University of Southern California's Information Sciences Institute, and I'm your podcast host. I'm serving as your virtual guide as we talk to some of these AI insiders, and we get their sense of where things are headed in this increasingly AI-infused world. And as a result, what excites them the most, what worries them the most, and what confuses them the most. Because if it's not clear, even experts are sometimes left scratching their heads here, as we're constantly being surprised. We're trying to figure out what an AI is probable, what's plausible, what's possible. So it's into this kind of challenge that we have our next brave soul, Dr. Mike Pazzani, who, among many things, I don't think we can call an up-and-comer, given that his bio pretty much includes having served in leadership positions across a wide range of areas, environments, and organizations. That includes ISI, UC Riverside, UC San Diego, Rutgers, MITRE Aerospace, NSF, NIH, Defense Science Board. And somehow, as we'll discuss in the podcast later on, he found the time to start a company himself. So we're lucky today to have Mike here to offer his thoughts on some of the slightly insane questions I normally ask of those AI insiders who, unlike Mike, might be too young to know better. Mike, welcome to AI Insiders.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
I hope that stays the case. One question that I normally ask people who have less of a storied career than yourself in AI is to go back in time and explain to your 12-year-old self what it is that you are doing today in artificial intelligence. I will give you a little bit more of a remit, though, if you want, to talk about what you've done or, in fact, what you feel like you would still like to do.
So why don't I start with what I'm doing now? A lot of what I've been doing is working in an area called explainable artificial intelligence. And I have a particular angle of this where I want to explain things to people like other people explain them to them. So I want the computer to have a dialogue with the person the same way an expert, a doctor, would have that dialogue with you. So for example, a lot of what I work in is AI in medicine. If you look at a mole on your skin, is that mole cancerous or not? It's the sort of decisions AI systems make, and they're actually pretty good at it. What they're not great at right now, and what I'm working on to make them better at, is how to explain it to people, how the decision is being made. So for example, in skin cancer, a doctor will tell you if it has an irregular border as opposed to a symmetric border, it's likely to be cancerous. If the colors are variable as opposed to uniform in color, it's likely to be cancerous. So my goal is to have these explanations in the same way the doctor does, and so that the patient can look at a mole and then distinguish a cancerous mole from one that's not cancerous. Now, while I do work on skin cancer dermatology, I also work on some things that are a little bit harder to explain, to a 12-year-old at least, glaucoma by looking at an image of the back of the eye, or pneumonia by looking at an X-ray. But the melanoma cancer one is, I think, the most approachable.
So you touched on something that's interesting there, which is explaining these things includes necessarily the concept of to whom are you explaining it. One thing that, obviously tracking the advanced and large language models, one of the things that's been interesting is when you engage with them, you ask them to talk about a subject or something of varying degrees of expertise, right? You are a world-class expert in X, explain this to, let's say, a 12-year-old, and they generally do a pretty good job. That was surprising to a lot of people, I think. Were you surprised by this, given how long you've been in this field?
I was very surprised by that. What's even more surprising to me is you can ask it to explain as Dr. Seuss would, and it comes up with a great rhyme, or you can ask it to explain it in iambic pentameter, and it also comes up with that. So to be honest, I'm astonished at how quickly it can come up with a Dr. Seuss-like rhyme to explain how to diagnose skin cancer.
Yeah, that is astounding. Of course, people would point out, well, what if that explanation isn't correct? It lends itself to a question that I've grappled with before, which is we're presuming that our explanations are correct. When I think about why people do things in the world, they'll provide me a fairly coherent narrative as to how they made their decision. And I'm inclined not to necessarily believe it, that that's not actually why or how they made that decision, but it's a good story. Is that true in medicine as well, or less so?
I think it's a good story, but maybe it's not just a good story. It's a good start.
Mm, mm.
So if I were to explain what the most important features in melanoma are, I've described a few of them. But then there are subtleties that are harder to put into language. And I think with experience, you learn that. And I think in some ways, that's what teaching or apprenticeship is. The teacher gives you a general rule that gets you 80, 90% of the way there. But then through experience, you refine that to get that 99% that you need.
I like that. Yeah, it's a good start that's a great way of thinking about it, I think. Um, you're still talking to your 12-year-old self, by the way. How'd you get here?
Um,
Where is your 12-year-old self in the world? Just out of curiosity.
my 12-year-old self is a pretty good student in mathematics and science in New Jersey. And, I'd say, working class parents, father's a fireman, mother's a legal secretary. I think my mom was smart enough to be a lawyer. She just didn't have the education, as she liked to say. My dad taught me hard work. And the combination of hard work and smarts, I think, is real important. That got me scholarships to college and things like that. Started out as a psychology major, then switched to a math major, then switched to a computer science major, where I sort of found my home. But I think the early training in psychology and even kept that up in graduate school has been quite important to artificial intelligence. Asking the question, how do people do this? I think has been quite important.
Yeah, that's a theme that comes up here regularly, which is if all you're doing is computer science, you may be missing out on some really important insights, certainly interdisciplinary insights that could inform artificial intelligence.
To be honest, I worry about that quite a bit with undergraduates or even PhD students. They know a lot about statistics and, gradient descent and all of that stuff, but don't really know enough about philosophy, psychology. And I think we've become a bit too specialized. There's been some analysis recently. Every AI person analyzed COVID X-rays, right? It was a fun thing to do,
That's right.
database.
Yeah.
And none of it was particularly useful because they didn't have all of the background in radiology. And they produced results that weren't generalizable. They were okay. But if you spend more time understanding your data, dealing with experts in the field, I think that's more important. Now, I actually happen to be an expert bird watcher in addition to doing this bird classification. And when I've met other people doing bird classification and I chat with them, they're talking about how to tell a goose from a hummingbird. And quite frankly, that's pretty easy. The hard part is how to tell two very similar hummingbirds apart. And so if you're doing that in your AI and you're trying to explain that, I think you're sort of better off.
Yeah, no, that's right. Don't put the hummingbird on the Thanksgiving table. That is a problem. I think everyone on the podcast today has acknowledged this, but no one has a real solution for it. Maybe not. Maybe solution is the wrong term, right? There are no solutions. There's only trade-offs. But what would you do about that? How would you change incentives or career developments or even education to include revising perhaps university to help address that blind spot?
So education-wise, but the graduate level and undergraduate level, I guess I would recommend being broader. So I read a lot of philosophy, the how children learn about causality, those sorts of things as a undergrad. I actually have an amusing story. I went into the UCLA library to pick up a psychology journal, probably from 1972, and I happened to pick up the 1872 version of the journal. And and it's, you don't do that often these days on the internet. And I spent the all afternoon reading that instead of the 1972 versions. So I would recommend, being a little bit broader.
What are you most worried about with AI, where we are now and where you think we might be headed?
Well, we're certainly headed to more and more increased autonomy.
Mm.
In fact, you probably know about Waymo, these autonomous vehicles. I took a ride in one for the first time in Santa Monica. There's these Waymo taxis you can call. I'm an early adopter and things, and happened to take a ride, and I found it actually quite good. But nonetheless, I'm scared of autonomous vehicles making mistakes that no person would make. They do say that they're safer, and I love the automatic braking in my car if a pedestrian comes out in front of it. But I'm sort of scared. When I was in the Waymo, it was stopped at a stop walk while a woman crossed the street, and she was staring at it rather suspiciously. And quite frankly, I build a lot of AI systems that are 98% accurate. If I try really hard, I can get 99. But I'm really scared of the autonomous vehicle deciding to go when there's a mother with a stroller in the crosswalk, and hopefully, no driver does that, and hopefully there's, fail-safe systems. We try to build them with fail-safe. So in addition to the autonomy, there's the lower level thing that would hit the brakes. But I am scared of the sort of accidents that will happen.
What worries you the most about people being hurt by these things? Is it that like this we'll see hurt on a scale we've never seen before? Is it that we don't know who to sue or how to hold people responsible for this? Walk me through like what scares you most there.
Hmm. Well, I think again, sometimes and we do this too often in computer science, is launch the alpha or beta project, test it out, and then fix it. That's fine if it's people who buy this also buy that, and you need to improve it a little bit. I think we need to have better engineering practices for when life is at stake, the autonomous vehicle, etc. Some of that is putting the fail-safe system in place, almost like, in the cars they have this, autonomous braking. If there's something in front, brake. It turns out some of the Tesla accidents, they've turned that off and only used the more advanced AI to figure out whether to brake or not. And maybe you ought to have the low level. If there's something in front of you that the radar senses, hit the brakes. And then there's always the unexpected, driving out in the desert, a tumbleweed goes across your car, goes in front of you. Do you lock the brakes or not?
Yeah.
I was in Australia on dirt roads on this island, and some kangaroos jumped in front of my car. That's not something that you see all the time. And you do hear actually that predicting the trajectory of kangaroos is not something that Tesla anticipated, predicting bicycles, etc. So these outliers will get in the way.
There's a lot of discussion slash confusion around AI. You are an AI guy. What do you hear from like your friends and family? Like, do they come to you for clarity in the space? And what do you think are like the biggest sources of confusion from their perspective?
Yes, sometimes they do, and sometimes it's sort of out of my expertise. And sometimes it causes my wife to uh, make fun of me. So the company that I started in 2000, Adaptive Info, did personalization for the wireless web. Los Angeles Times was one of our customers. And on a small cell phone, especially, we did Blackberries and Palm Pilots, if you remember
Oh,
those.
RIP. Yep.
Small mobile devices with slow transmission. You can't send the whole LA Times. So our goal was to figure out what 10 stories you'd be most interested in. And we had a motto, personalizing the wireless web. Now I sit around on my iPhone or iPad complaining about that ad that I get seen. And my wife says, "Oh yeah, personalizing the wireless web. That was a great idea, wasn't it?" So you do get needled a little bit for that, but I do get asked things outside of my expertise, as I often was asked things outside of my expertise when they know you're a computer science professor. What version of Windows should I be using? How do I upgrade this, etc. Now I do have friends who are authors and asks me, should they be using LLMs, should be using ChatGPT to create a rough draft of things. And to be honest, I've used ChatGPT to take a rough draft and say, can you condense this to this page and a half abstract to a page? And I look at it and it doesn't do a bad job. And I got to do a little extra editing, but it's faster than doing it myself.
Yep. No, this is why we are tackling the phenomenon of the secret cyborg. Is that people are experimenting with these tools, and we want one of the best ways we can make advances, I think, is to better understand like what they can and can't do based on people's experience. Okay, so then let me ask you the follow-on questions I had, which is, if you are a student who's interested getting into AI, or a new, let's say, newly minted master's slash PhD student starting a new job. What advice would you have for students, and what advice would you have for researchers starting their first job in AI?
Well, unfortunately, academic researchers these days, the advice that I would give them would be to spend a portion of your time in industry and a portion of your time in academia. It's happening more and more. And I think that gets you access to larger data sets, more compute power, but the academic still gives you the freedom to choose your own project, not just do, this mainstream, what the company wants, et cetera. Because a lot of what I've done, my most cited papers are sort of outside the mainstream, and some of which then became mainstream. But you look at things a different way, or you say, it's great everyone's doing that, but we should be doing this as well.
I'm curious if you can go back to when you first started studying psychology, and then you moved from psychology to other disciplines. What was it about psychology that was unsatisfying?
I'm not sure it was unsatisfying. I mean,
Okay.
so again, I was an undergrad from 76 to 80. Computers were novel, excitement, that sort of thing. I
Hmm.
mean, psychology, more incremental, steady progress. I did have the fear in 76. I know a number of people who had this fear of, what are you going to do when all the programs are written? You need an accounting program, you need this, you need that. Maybe that fear has come up again now. Really, can multimodal large language models do everything? We just need a few of those.
I mean, what future do I have as a podcaster? I agree. I think this can be done entirely through AI.
Yeah, pretty much. I think a podcaster could have quickly analyzed 150 of my papers and asked some.
Better
Uh,
questions. Say
I wasn't. I was trying not to say
Yeah,
that.
it's okay. I pride myself in my vaguely insane, slightly orthogonal questions. So I'll take it as a compliment, in fact, because it is really helpful to I think ask you questions that would not come directly from an LLM. Mike, this has been really enjoyable. Thank you. Without question, one of the great privileges of my professional career and personal career, frankly, to call myself a member of your team and have you on our team. So I really appreciate your coming on board, giving us some insights, some great anecdotes, and actually reasons to remain sort of enthusiastic, right, about what the future may yet bring. Is that fair?
Yeah. So first of all, I've enjoyed your time at ISI, and I've very much enjoyed your inviting me in our conversation. But yeah, I think we're just getting started. I'm going to end with one more anecdote since I've got the microphone. In addition to an AI researcher, I'm actually a pretty advanced amateur photographer. And it's shocking to see how AI is changing photography these days. There's AI autofocus. My latest camera, which I got a week ago, can in sports follow the guy who has the ball in basketball and keep focusing in on the guy with the ball. And it's tough for a photographer to do that. In my case, follow the bird who's flying behind the tree and get him when he comes out from the tree. It's really amazing what's happening and how this is changing things. That's happening everywhere. And I think we're really just getting started in AI.
I think that's right. And it's gonna be interesting, right? Which is why I call myself an apocalyptimist. It could be awesome. It may not be so awesome. And it's our job, as you know, to make sure we veer more towards awesome. All right. Well, if you enjoy these short podcasts, please do what only you can do as our listeners. We would appreciate some feedback. Rate us, score us, evaluate us, grade us, and subscribe. Spread the word. Send us feedback, please. Offer up additionally insane orthogonal questions so I can ask experts like Mike Pazzani things and questions they didn't see coming. And of course, just keep listening and learning. And join us, please, again for another episode of AI Insiders, where we'll keep exploring, keep learning, keep humanizing AI to help us navigate our way through this weird, weird world. Trying to do what humans can do best when they face these kinds of challenges, working together as if all our lives depend on each other. because they do. So for now and for the future, fight on.